didn't just sting your skin, it went hunting for your bones. Snow fell thick and heavy out on the ridge, but it didn't dare touch the fire. Every flake that drifted too close to the roaring blaze hissed and vanished in a breath of steam. Sarah Carter stood barefoot in the yard, one arm wrapped around her 5-year-old daughter Ellie, the other hand clutching tight to Noah's small fingers. Her dress was ripped at the hem, one sleeve charred and blackened. Soot striped her cheeks where tears had carved their way through the ash. In front of her, the only home they had ever had was burning to the ground. The cabin's roof was already gone, collapsed inward with a sound like the sky itself breaking. Rafters glowed red and orange, spitting sparks into the snow-filled dark. Smoke clawed at her throat. The heat pushed at her face, hot enough that it felt wrong in a winter night like this. Behind her ribs, everything felt hollow. "Mama?" Noah's voice trembled. "I can't feel my toes." There it was, the sentence that sliced deeper than any wind. She looked down. His boots were soaked, pants legs iced up to his shins. He was 6, but his jaw was clenched in a way that belonged on a grown man's face. He was trying not to cry. Sarah swallowed hard, tasting wood smoke and grief. "I know, baby," she rasped. "I know. Just hold on to me." Ellie whimpered into her shoulder, a thin, broken sound, not the full-throated wail a 5-year-old should have. That frightened Sarah more than the fire. Smoke had already had its hands on that tiny chest. She had gone back for them. That was the only thing she could cling to in the chaos. 1 minute she'd been stirring potatoes on the stove, the next the chimney had coughed, then roared, flame falling out of the pipe like a sheet. The curtains had gone up in a breath. She didn't remember dropping the pan. She remembered scooping Ellie from her bed, screaming for Noah, shoving the stuck front door until it gave. The rest was a blur of heat and panic and splintering wood. Now there was nothing left but the sound of burning, the sting of smoke, and the bite of winter chewing at their legs. Nobody wanted her. Not the town that crossed to the other side of the street when she walked by. Not the women who said, "Poor thing," and never stayed long enough to finish a cup of coffee. Not the men who looked at a widow like she was bad luck you could catch by standing too close. Nobody wanted her, until the sound of hoofbeats cut through the wind. "Noah," she whispered, head snapping up. "Did you hear that?" He nodded, eyes wide. "Mama, someone's coming." Snow blurred the world into streaks of gray and orange. Out of it, a dark shape moved, tall horse, broad-shouldered rider, coat snapping in the wind. The horse snorted at the smell of smoke, hesitating at the edge of the fire's glow. For a heartbeat, terror spiked through Sarah. "Please, Lord, don't let it be some drunk come to watch us burn." The rider swung down in one easy move, boots crunching on frozen ground. He pushed his hat back just enough that the firelight caught his face. Luke Halden, the rancher from North Hollow. Folks in the valley called him quiet, solid, the kind of man whose grief had carved itself into his bones and stayed there. Widower, worked his land alone, went to town when he had to, spoke when there was a reason, and kept his eyes mostly on the horizon. Tonight, his eyes were on her. "Sarah?" His voice was low, roughened by cold and smoke. "That your place?" For a moment, all she could do was nod. Her throat had closed up tight around any words. Luke's gaze moved, steady and sharp. From the collapsing cabin, to the burned sleeve on her arm, to the 2 children huddled against her sides. He saw everything. And he moved. Without another word, he shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat. The wind hit the wet cotton of his shirt, but he didn't flinch. He stepped toward her, hands out, coat held like an offering. She tensed, instinct bristling. People didn't reach for her without a cost. "It's all right," he said quietly, stopping a few feet short. "I'm not here to take anything from you, just to give you this." She shook her head. "Luke, I can't. You'll freeze." "I've got another one up at the ranch." His tone didn't sharpen, but it didn't bend either. "You don't. Put it on." The little one's shaking. Ellie's small fingers dug into her collarbone. She was shaking. Sarah knew it. But the years of pitying looks and whispered judgments pushed the wrong words out of her mouth. People will talk if... People already talk. His eyes flashed, just for a second. The light from the burning cabin painted them gold. Let 'em. They don't get a say in whether your kids freeze to death. Something inside her armor cracked. She let him wrap the coat around her shoulders, tucking it close around Ellie too. Warmth hit her in a slow wave, smelling like leather, pine, horses, and a life that hadn't burned down. Luke crouched to Noah's level. You hurt anywhere, son? Noah shook his head fast. No, sir, just cold. Cold we can fix, Luke said. Fire, we can't. Anybody else in there? The words scraped her raw on the way out. No, he's been gone almost 2 years now. Luke's eyes softened at the corners. He knew. Everybody knew about the tree that fell on Tom, about how death could walk into a life in 1 second and stay forever. You got anywhere to go? He asked. She opened her mouth. Her silence was answer enough. Luke looked back at the burning cabin, then at the children, then at her. Then you're coming with me, he said simply. Her spine stiffened. Luke, He cut her off, but gently. You can argue later. Storm's got teeth tonight. You stay out here much longer. I'll be carrying all three of you, and Bear, he jerked his chin at the horse, is old enough without that kind of nonsense. Noah's voice slipped out, small and frightened. We don't have a house anymore. Luke's gaze flicked to him. Then you borrow mine, he said, till we figure something else out. Will you hear me? Noah nodded like a boy who'd just been thrown a rope he never expected. Ellie coughed, a raw, smoky sound, and that decided it. Sarah looked one last time at the collapsing doorway, at the window where she'd watched the first snowfall last week, and understood there was nothing left there but ashes. Okay, she whispered. We'll go. Luke's shoulders dropped a fraction, as if some part of him had been braced against her refusal. Good. He squeezed her shoulder once, quick and steady. I'll take Ellie up front with me. You and Noah ride behind. I'll get you there. He lifted Ellie like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest with a care that made something twist in Sarah's heart. Then he swung into the saddle, sat the horse like he'd been born there, and held his hand down to her. She stared at it for half a breath. Then she put her hand in his. He pulled her up behind him as if she were made of feathers, then hauled Noah into the space between them. Hold on tight, he said. Don't look back. But as Bear started forward, hooves crunching through snow, Sarah did look back. Just once. At the fire eating her husband's handiwork board by board, at the life she'd tried to hold together with calloused hands and stitched seams. The roof groaned and gave way. Sparks shot up like a handful of stars thrown into the dark. Then the snow swallowed the sound of burning, and they rode toward a warm, golden light she wasn't sure she deserved. When Sarah woke, she thought for a moment she had dreamed the fire. There was no smoke in her lungs, no sting in her eyes, just warmth on her face and the steady crackle of a stove in the next room. For a half second, panic snapped through her. Where were the children? Then she heard it, Noah's laugh. Quiet, uncertain, but a laugh. She pushed herself up on one sore elbow. The room around her was small and tidy. White curtains with edges yellowed by time, a simple dresser, a quilt heavy enough to fight any December night. On the dresser sat a small photograph frame turned face down. She didn't have to see it to know what it was. Grief recognizes grief from across a room. Her bare feet found cool floorboards as she stood. Her dress still smelled like smoke. Her burned arm throbbed under Luke's ointment and bandage. She opened the door. The smell of coffee and something warm and savory filled the air. The main room glowed with lamplight and morning sun squeezing through frosted windows. Noah sat at the table, hunched like he didn't quite dare relax. In front of him, a thick slice of bread with honey gleamed on a plate. He took small, reverent bites, like he was afraid it might disappear if he ate too fast. Ellie was on the couch, swallowed in a faded blue dress several sizes too big. The sleeves were rolled again and again to reveal tiny hands. She was giggling as Luke carefully turned one cuff up just a bit more. There, he said, mouth twitching. Now your hands are free for important work, like spoons. Ellie beamed. It's pretty, she said, patting the dress. It smells like sunshine. Sarah's throat tightened. She knew whose dress that had been. Luke glanced up, feeling her before he saw her. Morning, he said softly. Didn't mean to let you sleep so long. How? Long? She managed. What time is it? Late enough you shouldn't feel guilty, he said. Early enough to still call it morning. Coffee? She opened her mouth to say off. We should go? We've already taken too much. This is just for a night. What came out instead was, yes? Please. He poured coffee into a chipped mug and set it at the place across from Noah, as if there had always been room for her there. Then his gaze slid to Ellie's dress. That was my little girl's? He said quietly. It's been folded up for 2 winters now. Figured it's better on a child than in a drawer. Sarah's fingers brushed the flowered hem. Are you sure? She whispered. I don't want to. You're not taking anything, he cut in gently. You're using it. Difference matters. They ate soup and warm bread that tasted like more kindness than she knew what to do with. Noah devoured his bowl, then looked embarrassed when honey dripped onto his chin. Luke slid a cloth toward him with a half smile. You've got good manners, kid. That's more than half the job in this world. Papa said that too, Noah blurted, then winced like he'd stepped somewhere tender inside himself. His shoulders drooped. Luke didn't rush into the silence. Sounds like your papa was a smart man, he said. Noah nodded, eyes glistening. After breakfast, Luke spoke as if he were discussing the weather. You'll stay here till the storm passes, he said. No one's walking anywhere in that. When we can see the road again, we'll talk about next steps. Sarah's instinct flared. Luke, we can't put you out like this. Your bed, your food. You're not putting me out, he replied. You're keeping this place from echoing. His gaze flicked toward the bare tree in the corner. House has been too quiet too long. Ellie padded over and stared up at the undecorated evergreen. Why is it naked? She asked. Luke huffed a surprised laugh. Because I didn't feel much like Christmas by myself, he admitted. Didn't seem right to decorate a tree for an empty room. Ellie frowned. Trees like to be pretty, she informed him. They get sad if no one helps. Luke glanced at Sarah. In that look, a question. Sarah hesitated. If she let the children decorate that tree, if she let this house start to feel like theirs even for a moment, leaving would hurt worse. But hadn't they had enough of empty places? She drew in a breath. If you don't mind, they could help. Mind? Luke shook his head once. I was hoping you'd say that. He hauled down a wooden box of old ornaments from a high shelf. Glass bulbs dulled by years, carved animals, strings of wooden beads. The children dove in like miners, delighted by every treasure. Ellie took the low branches. Noah claimed the middle. Luke leaned against the kitchen counter with his coffee, watching them, watching her. House hasn't sounded like this in a long time, he said quietly. It was true. The clink of ornaments, the soft thump of small feet, Ellie's delighted gasps, Noah's patient explanations. No, hang that one there so they balance. Scrubbed the dust from the corners of the room. For the first time since Tom's coffin had dropped into West Texas dirt, something in Sarah's chest loosened. She wrapped her hands around her mug to hide the way they shook. We'll go after the storm, she said, almost to herself. I'll find work. We won't be a burden. Luke's head turned. You're not a burden, he said simply. You're my neighbors. That's all the name for it I need. But he didn't push further. He just watched the tree come back to life, branch by branch, the way someone watched a miracle they barely dared believe in. 2 days later, the sky cleared enough to let light through. Snow lay deep and clean over the valley, softening every edge. From the front porch, Sarah could see the trail down to town etched as a faint line. We need to go down, Luke said. Sheriff ought to hear about the fire from you, not from a story that's been chewed on all week. And you've got a right to talk to Reverend Miller. The thought of facing town again made her stomach knot. She'd stood in that churchyard less than a year ago while they lowered Tom into the ground. Back then, there had been hands on her shoulder, casseroles on her table, a blur of sympathy. Sympathy faded fast. But Luke was right. She couldn't hide on his hill forever. He helped her up into the wagon, his hands warm through her gloves. Noah and Ellie settled on either side of her, bundled tight. Luke sat on the buckboard, reins in hand, shoulders squared into the cold. Town looked smaller somehow as they rolled in. A ring of buildings around the church steeple and the sheriff's office, smoke curling from chimneys. Heads turned as the wagon clattered down the main street. They saw her. Saw the widow who'd lost her husband. Saw the woman sitting in Luke Halden's wagon. Saw too much and not enough. At the sheriff's office, she insisted on going in alone. It's my house, she said. My fire. My blame. Luke studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll be waiting right here. Sheriff Grady Barnes was a broad-shouldered man with gray in his mustache and something like fairness in his gaze. Ma'am, he said, half rising as she stepped in. Heard tell of smoke up your way. I was aiming to ride out once the drift settled. You all right? Our cabin's gone, she said, laying the story out in clean, simple lines. The faulty chimney, the falling sheet of flame, the scramble to get the children out, the way the fire had moved too fast for buckets or prayers. "Sorry for your loss," Barnes said when she finished. She almost laughed at the word loss, as if a cabin were a misplaced glove. "Yes, Sheriff," she said instead. When she walked back out into the cold, she could feel eyes on her from every porch, every store window. Pity from some, curiosity from others, judgment from more than she wanted to count. At the general store, she walked straight toward the barrels and sacks, reciting in her head the list of things Luke had said they needed. Martha, behind the counter, looked her up and down like Sarah was something tracked in on somebody's boots. "Well, now," Martha drawled, "if it isn't Mrs. Carter, heard about the fire. Tragedy, that. Shame. We're managing," Sarah said. "We just need a few things for." "Heard you found yourself a soft landing already," Martha cut in, eyebrows climbing. "Up at Halden's place. Didn't waste time." Heat surged up Sarah's neck. "He took us in so the children wouldn't freeze," she said. "That's all." "I'm sure that's what folks'll say," Martha replied, mouth tightening. "You know how it is. Widow in a bachelor's house. Tongues wag. They don't care much about reasons." The words landed like a slap. Sarah's hands clenched around the small scrap of paper she held. Before she could find a response, the bell above the door jangled again. Luke stepped in, bringing the cold with him. He took in the scene in a glance. Martha's pursed lips, Sarah's flushed face. "Mrs. Martha," he said calmly, "I came in last week asking after flour. You got any today, or did you spend all your time weighing out rumors?" Martha stiffened. "No cause for rudeness, Mr. Halden. I was merely expressing concern." "Far as I can tell, your concern doesn't put food on a single table," he said. "The flour does. Let's stick to the part that feeds people." She sniffed, but turned to scoop flour all the same. Sarah could feel the air in the room crackle. People were watching. People would talk. On the way back up the hill, the wagon bumped through ruts hidden under snow. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I didn't mean to drag your name into anything." "It's my name," he said. "They can say what they like. Doesn't change who I am. But they'll think that I've got 3 extra mouths at my table after a neighbor's house burned down," he said. "Good. That happens to be the truth." She pressed her lips together. "They'll think more than that." "Then they can come say it to my face," he replied. "Most of them won't. It's easier to talk into a teacup than to a man's eyes." She didn't answer. Her fingers twisted in her lap. Shame was a familiar coat. It fit too well. When they reached the ranch again, Luke swung down and offered his hand. She took it, even as her mind spun. That afternoon, the sound of a different set of hooves came up the drive. When Sarah opened the door, her heart lurched. "Cora," she breathed. Tom's sister stood on the porch, cheeks red from the cold, eyes sharp as broken glass. She hadn't been out to see Sarah since the funeral. "I heard about the fire," Cora said, "and about where you landed." Sarah stepped back. "Come in before you freeze." Cora didn't move. She let her gaze travel over the room behind Sarah, the second coat hanging on the peg, Ellie's borrowed dress draped over a chair, Noah's toy horse on the floor. "Well," Cora said, "you do bounce back quick, don't you?" The words hit harder than the wind. "Tom's been in the ground not even a year," Cora went on, voice low and tight. "But here you are, warm in another man's house. I suppose some women don't know how to sit still with grief." Anger flashed, bright and brittle. "Since Tom died," Sarah said quietly, "I have split wood, hauled water, mended fences, and sat up nights with children too scared to sleep. Hey, you never came once. You sent a note through the preacher that said you were praying. That was all." "My husband works long hours," Cora said. "We have our own troubles." "And I had nothing," Sarah whispered. "Nothing but those children and 4 walls. Now I don't even have the walls, and you call the only hand that pulled us from the snow a sin." "They're saying in town you burned the place yourself," Cora snapped. "So you'd have an excuse to move in up here. They say your kind always land on their feet." "My kind?" Sarah repeated softly. "Widows who don't know their place," Cora said. "Tom deserves better than to have his name dragged through the mud by gossip about you and Halden." For a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe. She shut the door gently once Cora left, then leaned her back against it. Her knees felt like water. When Luke came in later, snow in his hair, he took one look at her and set the hay hook down harder than necessary. "Who was that?" he asked. "No one," she lied too quickly. He studied her face, then the way her hands shook. "Sarah." Cora, she admitted. She had thoughts about us being here. He snorted softly. I'm sure she did. She wasn't wrong, Sarah said, voice barely more than a breath. People will talk. They'll attach your name to mine. You'll be dragged into it. You'll be tied to us whether you want to or not. And if I am, he asked, you think I can't stand folks talking? It's not fair to you, she whispered. You gave us a safe place for a few nights. I'm grateful, but I won't ruin your standing here. I won't be the burden that finally breaks a good man's patience. The word burden sat between them like a stone. Luke opened his mouth, closed it again. Something tightened in his jaw that had nothing to do with the cold outside. Sarah, he said finally, quiet but firm, this is my house. I decide who sits at my table. I offered you that room because I wanted you here, not because somebody shoved me into it. Her eyes filled. She turned away to hide it. That night, after the children were asleep, she sat at the table with a stub of pencil and a scrap of paper. Luke had gone out to check on the stock. The wind moaned around the corners of the house. She stared at the blank page until the words blurred. Then she wrote, hand trembling, Luke, thank you for everything. You've been kinder than I deserve. I can't let your name be dragged down because of me. I'll take the children to Reverend Miller. Please don't come after us. You've already done more than enough. Sarah Allers. She folded the note, laid it in the center of the table where he couldn't miss it. Then she woke Noah and Ellie in the dark, bundled them into borrowed coats with clumsy fingers, and stepped out into the snow. The storm had crept back in while they slept. By the time Sarah opened the door, snow was coming down in hard, slanting sheets. Wind shoved at her, icy fingers prying under her collar. She pulled her shawl tight and kept her head down. Stay close, she told the children. Hold on to me. Don't let go. They waded off the porch and into a world that had turned white and wild. Drifts climbed almost to Noah's knees. Ellie stumbled with every other step, little boots disappearing into powder. They weren't headed toward town exactly. The road would be too open, the wind too vicious. Instead, she aimed for the old chapel across the ridge, a small, half-forgotten building travelers sometimes used for shelter. It would be out of the worst of the wind. Her burned arm ached. Her legs shook. Shame burned hotter than the cold. If we leave now, before anyone sees, if we go to the church, if we disappear from Luke's Hill, maybe they'll stop saying his name with mine. She didn't realize she was whispering to herself until Noah tugged at her skirt. Mama, I'm tired. I know, she said. Just a little further. We'll rest soon, I promise. At the edge of a gully, she stumbled and almost went to her knees. She pushed the children into a stand of scrub to break the worst of the wind. Her breath came in ragged puffs. Just a minute, she gasped. Catch your breath. Ellie's lips were blue at the corners. Noah's teeth chattered. Snow clung to their lashes. She wrapped her arms around them both, trying to shield them with her body as the wind roared. Just a little more, she whispered, not sure if she was talking to them or herself. Just hold on. Or, a voice called, sharp as a whip crack, you could not freeze to death in my front yard. Her head jerked up. Through the white churn of the storm, a dark figure was moving toward them. Horse first, then rider. Bear's broad chest pushed through the snow like it was water. Luke's hat was pulled low, scarf wrapped over his mouth, but she knew him. He swung down before the horse had fully stopped, boots sinking deep. What? He demanded, voice hoarse with cold and something a lot like fear. Are you doing out here? I told you not to come, she said, which wasn't an answer at all. And I've never been much good at doing the foolish thing just because someone asks nice, he shot back. You left in a blizzard with 2 children, Sarah. That's not bravery, that's despair. I can't stay, she said, the words tearing out of her. They'll talk. They'll throw your name around like it's something dirty. Cora was right. I can't be the reason decent folk look sideways at you. Snowflakes clung to his beard. His eyes were fierce in the sliver of face she could see. Sarah, he said slowly, you think I give a damn what Martha at the store or Cora in her parlor say about me? The only opinion that means a lick is the one I see when I look in a mirror. And I couldn't look myself in the eye if I let you walk out of my house into this. She shook her head, tears freezing on her lashes. I won't be your burden. I can't be your charity case. You are not charity, his voice dropped, rough and steady. You're a woman who pulled two children out of a burning cabin with her bare hands. You're the mother of a boy who is braver than he knows, and a girl who believes trees get sad if nobody dresses them up. You are not a burden, Sarah Carter. You are a blessing my stubborn hide almost missed. She stared at him, stunned. Why? She whispered. You barely knew me before that fire. He blew out a long breath that sent mist into the freezing air. Because in 4 days, he said, this house of mine has felt more alive than it has in 4 years. Because I heard Noah laughing at my old stories and Ellie singing to my coffee pot. Because when I saw your house burning, my heart stopped like somebody'd put a hand around it. And because I'm tired of sitting in a quiet chair pretending that's better than risking anything. Noah's voice shivered out of him. Mr. Luke, we didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't, Luke said firmly. Not one bit of it. Grown folks and their mean mouths did that, and that's on them. Ellie stirred, pressing her face against Sarah. Mama, are we going home? She asked sleepily. The word home tore something open in Sarah. I don't know, she choked. Luke stepped closer, hand extended, not grabbing, not forcing, just offering. Come back with me, he said. At least till Christmas passes. Let the storm blow itself out. Let the talkers get bored of their own noise. After that, if you want to walk away, I'll hitch the team myself and take you wherever you think you need to go. But don't make this choice with your back to me and your face in a blizzard. The wind howled around them, impatient. Sarah looked toward the blank white, where town lay somewhere far off. Then she looked back the way they'd come, toward a hill with a house on it, smoke curling from the chimney even now, a half-decorated tree in the corner just waiting for more small hands. Noah's face was pinched and pale. Ellie's fingers had gone slack. Fear and shame and longing crashed inside her. Slowly, hand-shaking, she put her burned fingers into Luke's outstretched palm. His hand closed around hers, warm and solid. All right then, he murmured. He lifted Ellie into his arms again, tucked her inside his coat. She sagged against him like a kitten. He boosted Noah up into the saddle, then helped Sarah up behind. Hold on this time, he said. No sneaking off before breakfast. She almost laughed at that. Almost. As Bear turned back toward the hill, Luke's voice reached her over his shoulder. You're not running from shame anymore, he said. Not while I'm on this side of the dirt. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe him. By the time they reached the ranch, all three of them were shaking. Warmth hit like a wall when Luke shoved the door open and hustled them inside. The fire snapped in the stove. The pine-scented, smoke-softened air wrapped itself around them like a blanket. Boots off, he ordered gently. Coats by the stove. You'll thaw faster if you let the heat reach you. While Sarah peeled frozen leather from Noah's feet and rubbed warmth back into his toes, Luke put more wood on the fire and set a pot of milk to heat. Ellie barely stirred as he settled her on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin. On the table, the note Sarah had written lay where she'd left it. The edges were curled from the damp. She picked it up with numb fingers, stared at her own cramped writing. Then she opened the stove and fed the paper into the flames. It caught, curled, and burned quickly, disappearing into the coals. Luke saw. He didn't say a word. An hour later, they were all wrapped in dry socks and thick blankets. The storm outside had muffled itself to a distant hush. Inside, the children sat on the floor, finishing the last scraps of cornbread Luke had warmed, eyes already drooping. It's nearly Christmas, Sarah said quietly, watching the snow gather on the window panes. And they don't have presents, no tree of their own. No. They have warm beds and full bellies, Luke said. That's more than a lot of folks. As for the rest, he tipped his head toward the corner. We've still got work to do on that tree. Ellie perked up immediately. It's still naked on top, she said solemnly. Noah glanced at the box of decorations. We could finish it, he said, if it's all right. Luke smiled, soft and a little crooked. I was kind of hoping you'd offer. They fetched the box back to the table, digging through it like treasure hunters. There were wooden stars, tarnished tin hearts, glass baubles with hairline cracks, a string of beads that had to have taken someone hours to thread, a sock with a child's name stitched into it in uneven letters. Anna. Sarah traced the letters with her fingertips. This was your daughter's, she said. Luke's face changed in a way that made her careful. Was, he said. She liked to hang it crooked, said Santa walked funny after a long night's work and should feel right at home. Grief and love sat side by side in his voice. Would it be all right if, Sarah hesitated, if we hang it up too? For her, for them, together. He held her gaze for a long moment. I think she'd like that, he said. They hung Anna's stocking beside two hastily sewn new ones that Sarah cobbled together from scraps. A red one with N for Noah, a slightly crooked E for Ellie. The tree slowly filled, Ellie's beads low and lopsided, Noah's careful stars in the middle, Luke's big hands placing a carved horse hidden near the back. When they lit a few stubby candles tucked safely into metal clips, the whole room glowed. Shadows danced on the walls. The tree's reflection shimmered in the dark window glass like another world. Luke stepped back, folded his arms, and took it in. Not bad for a bunch of strays, he murmured. Sarah's lips curved. We look like a family, she said without thinking. The word hung there between them. Luke didn't flinch from it. His eyes stayed on the children, who were now squabbling softly over which branch deserved the last ornament. Maybe we are, he said quietly. Just need time to learn the shape of it. Later, when the children had finally sagged into sleep, Noah curled on a pallet by the stove, Ellie sprawled on the couch under Anna's old quilt. Sarah found herself standing by the window. Outside, the world was white and still, as if God had laid a clean sheet over yesterday's scars. You look like you're waiting for the other boot to drop, Luke said from the table. She turned. He sat with his coffee, shoulders a little hunched, like a man braced for bad weather he couldn't quite see yet. I don't know what comes next, she admitted. Spring. Work, trying to rebuild, people talking. Some of them might soften, some won't. He nodded. I don't know either, but I know this much. He paused as if tasting the words before trusting them. You and those two aren't facing any of it alone, not unless you choose to. Her breath hitched. I don't want to be something you feel obligated to carry. You're not an obligation, he said. You're hope. She laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Hope? Me? Yeah, he said. You walked into my house with smoke in your hair and your whole life in cinders, and you still managed to fuss about whether your boy wiped his mouth on a cloth. That's hope. You pulled 3 souls out of a fire and then worried about taking up space in my kitchen. That's hope. You keep going when most folks would lie down and let the world pass over them. Don't tell me that's not hope. Tears stung her eyes. He reached out, slow and careful, and brushed one away with the pad of his thumb. Safe touch, gentle, no demand hiding behind it. She closed her eyes for a second, just breathing. Luke, she whispered, I'm scared of caring, of needing anyone. I don't know how to do it without losing myself. I'm scared too, he answered. Thought I buried the part of me that cared about anything but fences and cattle when they lowered Anna next to our little girl. Turns out I was wrong. It's back, and it ain't polite or easy, but I'd rather be scared with you than comfortable alone. The fire popped, sending up a spray of sparks. Safe isn't something you earn by suffering enough, he added quietly. It's something someone offers you, and I'm not taking it back tomorrow just because Martha flaps her jaw. She swallowed. You really don't care? He held her gaze. I care about what kind of man your children see when they look at me, he said. I care whether this house has laughter in it. I care whether you can sleep without jolting awake at every sound. That's all. For the first time since Tom's death, a strange feeling curled in Sarah's chest. Not dread, not numbness, something softer, something like a beginning. Christmas Eve came quiet. The storm had spent itself. The drifts had settled. Smoke from ranch houses along the valley rose into a pale blue sky. Inside Luke's cabin, the day moved in small, warm ways. Noah helped Luke haul in an extra load of wood, proud of every armful. Ellie sat at the table with Sarah, tying scraps of ribbon around cookies they'd made from Martha's flour and the last of the sugar. They didn't have much. But for the first time, not much felt like enough. In the afternoon, a knock sounded at the door. Luke wiped his hands and went to answer it. Sheriff Barnes stood there, hat in his hands, boots dusted with snow. Behind him, surprisingly, stood Reverend Miller. Afternoon, Luke, the sheriff said. Ma'am, kids? Noah straightened. Ellie peeked out from behind Sarah's skirts. We came to see how you were faring, Reverend Miller said. Word travels fast in a town this size, some of it crooked. His eyes were kind, if a little tired. Figured we'd better hear the straight of it from the source. Luke's shoulders eased. Come in then. I've got coffee. Kids will show off their tree if you're not careful. The men stepped inside, stomping the cold off their boots. Their eyes took in the scene. The stockings over the hearth, the tree with its mismatched ornaments, the children's faces, the way Sarah stood not in a corner, but beside Luke. Barnes gave a small nod, almost to himself. Looks right, he said. Some folks are inclined to make trouble where there is none, Miller added. I've had words with a few already. My door is open to you, Mrs. Carter, but I'm glad to see you have another one as well. Sarah's cheeks warmed. Yes, sir, she said. We're being looked after. Good, the Reverend said simply. Then consider this a visit of blessing, not rescue. They took their coffee, admired the crooked string of beads Ellie insisted on pointing out, and left with a handshake that said more than their words. When the door shut again, Sarah let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Seems not all tongues are sharpened for cutting, Luke said dryly. No, she agreed. Some are, sewing things back together. Evening slipped in, blue and soft. They ate a simple stew by lamplight. The children yawned their way through a story about a stubborn calf who refused to be born until Luke promised to name it something dignified. When Noah and Ellie finally collapsed into their blankets near the tree, the house settled into a deep, peaceful quiet. Sarah stood in front of the tree, watching the candlelight flicker over the tin heart Ellie had hung low. It turned slowly, catching firelight and shadow. Luke came to stand beside her. They're out, he said, glancing at the children. Both of them. World could fall down and they'd sleep through it. For once, I'm glad, she said. They deserve at least one Christmas they don't have to be brave through. He was silent for a beat. So do you, he said. She looked up at him. I don't know what to call this, she said. I don't know if I'm ready to think about more, about marriage or promises or anything big. My heart hasn't caught up yet, but I know this house feels safe. And I know walking away would hurt worse than staying. He nodded, like that matched something he'd already decided. I'm not asking you for vows tonight, he said, or for forever. I'm asking you to let this place be your home as long as you want it, to let me stand on your side when the world gets mean, to let those kids grow up knowing they never have to wonder where they'll sleep when it storms. Her eyes stung, but the tears felt different this time. Less like drowning, more like a thaw. That's a lot you're offering, she whispered. Not near as much as I'm getting, he replied. He turned to face her fully, the tree lights painting little sparks in his eyes. Sarah Carter, he said quietly, this house has had a place set for someone for a long time now. I didn't know who it was for. Now I do. Her breath caught. He didn't step closer, didn't reach for more than words. You're home now, he said. The room seemed to hold its breath with her. Home, not my place. Not the ranch. Not a roof, home. She let the words sink in, lay down roots in the worn thin soil of her heart. Slowly, she reached out and laid her hand over his, warm, small, willing. Luke's fingers closed around hers, steady and sure. Behind them, the fire burned steady, not wild. In front of them, 2 children slept under a tree 3 adults had brought back to life. Outside, the snow lay smooth over old tracks. They didn't know what stories people might spin about them in the months to come. They didn't know what work spring would bring, or what new sorrows, or what new joys. But they knew this. When the wind howled and the night pressed against the windows, there would be light in this house. There would be voices and laughter and quiet breathing and sleep. There would be a man who had lost almost everything and still, somehow, found room to open his door. There would be a woman who'd run through fire and blizzard both and finally stopped running. And whenever fear rose up and whispered you don't belong, there would be a voice, low, steady, unmistakable, answering over it, you're home now. And for the first time in a long, hard while, she believed it.